Stage 11. The Companions of Man. The Densification of Spirit. RaMaSedi now introduces animals, not as secondary beings, but as extensions of spirit in varying densities. Each animal represents a different level of soul vibration, from the higher sentient creatures that bond with man, dogs, horses, elephants, to the simpler organisms that express basic vitality, insects, worms, plankton. These beings serve as mirrors of man's emotions, instincts, and primal nature. They allow consciousness to experience itself in more compact, instinctive forms. In this, spirit continues to densify, descending further into material vibration while retaining a link to source. The animal is not a fall from grace, it is spirit learning to feel with fewer filters. RaMaSedi is both source and presence in the world. It is not an external other that arrives after man. Some forms of animal life first emerge as direct, material expressions of RaMaSedi's creative pulse, deep in geological time, while later expressions of animal diversity are formed with the participation of humans, who act as conscious mediators of that same source. In other words, RaMaSedi's activity has multiple modes. It can bring forth life directly, and it can bring forth life through beings who themselves carry RaMaSedi, human custodians, shamans, or communities that practice intentional breeding and stewardship. This explains why animals both predate human cultures, e.g. ancient megafauna, and later multiply, diversify, and become companions under human guidance. Human action is therefore not the origin of all animal life, but it is the responsible, co-creative shaping of life that continues RaMaSedi's work at the level of culture and ecology, man as co-creator. Once these forms are established, man begins to participate consciously in creation. Through observation, domestication, and even selective breeding, man learns to manipulate forms, to mirror RaMaSedi's creative impulse within his own domain. The shepherd, the hunter, the farmer, each mirrors an aspect of divine creation in motion. Through this process, man deepens his sense of stewardship and kinship with all life. The act of breeding or shaping animal life is not merely practical, it is metaphysical. Man learning to echo divine formation. Insects in the minimal soul. RaMaSedi also gives rise to the smallest and simplest forms. Insects, microorganisms, and other minute life. These are not accidents or lower creatures, but essential expressions of minimal consciousness. Spirit condensed to its most efficient forms. They maintain the balance of ecosystems. They represent the foundations of physical existence, a living network that sustains the higher forms. In them, spirit experiences pure function without self-awareness, a grounding anchor to the densest planes. The chain of consciousness. This stage is about continuity, not hierarchy. From man, metaconsciousness, to animal, instinctual consciousness, to insect, minimal consciousness, there exists an unbroken thread linking back to RaMaSedi. It's a spectrum, not a ladder, each form expressing consciousness at a different intensity. Man arrow, animal arrow, insect arrow, source. Each communicates upward and downward through vibration, instinct, and presence. Man's compassion toward animals is therefore not sentimental. It's remembrance, a recognition that the same spirit animates both. Biblical parallels. The biblical record provides a symbolic witness to this stage, particularly in Genesis 2, the second creation account, which is more intimate and relational than Genesis 1. Genesis 2, 18-20. It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. This directly parallels stage 11's theme: companionship, diversification, and co-creation. Adam participates in the creative process by naming the animals, a symbolic act of defining essence and order. It also reinforces that animals were introduced after man, not as an afterthought, but as partners in experience. Genesis 1, 24-25. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds. Here the earth itself is portrayed as a womb for life, a manifestation of RaMaSedi's densifying spirit through material vibration. Scientific parallels. Even within evolutionary biology, there are resonances that align conceptually with the densification of spirit. If one interprets spirit as conscious organization increasing in complexity and variety, the Cambrian explosion approximately 540 million years ago, a real scientific event where there was a sudden diversification of animal life on Earth. It represents an explosion of forms, exactly what stage 11 describes as the densification and diversification of spirit into vessels. Life went from simple to multicellular, from soft-bodied to complex organisms, echoing a cosmic creative surge. Symbiosis and ecosystem balance. Every living being, from humans to insects, is interdependent. This fits perfectly with the statement that insects maintain the balance of ecosystems. Lynn Margola's theory of symbiogenesis shows that life evolved through cooperation, not just competition, mirroring the Ubuntu-like interconnectedness inherent in RaMaSedi's design. Spiritual/metaphysical references African indigenous thought. In African metaphysics, animals and insects are not lesser beings, but holders of specific spiritual frequencies. The Bantu term seriti, or isitunzi, or a life force, applies not only to humans but to all living things, acknowledging different densities of the same life force. Totemic systems, Zulu Izithakazelo, Tswana Dichupo, Shona Mutupo, recognize animals as spiritual reflections of clans or human traits, linking humans and animals through shared essence. The Hermetic principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. This principle, from the Kybalion Hermetic philosophy, supports the continuity described in this cosmology. Consciousness flows downward from spirit arrow, soul arrow body, manifesting in layers of increasing density. The animal and insect realms are thus material echoes of higher consciousness, not separate from it. Kabbalistic, chi, esoteric parallel. The Jewish mystic tradition, Kabbalah, speaks of nephesh, animal soul, ruach, emotional spiritual soul, and neshama, divine soul. These correspond neatly to the levels described in this cosmology: minimal, instinctual, and metaconsciousness, all expressions of one source. Synthesis, how these references validate the stage 11. Each domain, scriptural, scientific, spiritual, points to the same underlying truth. Life unfolded in layers of consciousness, from simple to complex, and man stands within this continuum, not above it. In stage 10, RaMaSedi's order established a divine table, the lawful sustenance of all beings. Each species was given food according to its elemental composition and vibration. This means all nourishment was non-destructive, a transference of energy, not the consumption of death. Instead, when man and beast fell into lower frequencies after the descent into matter reached full density, appetite shifted from energy absorption to matter consumption. Flesh-eating emerged as a consequence of energetic forgetfulness, the soul identifying with the dust rather than with the light. Flesh equals dust equals the substance that forms both man and beast. Therefore, consuming flesh, man or animal, is symbolically cannibalistic, one form of dust feeding upon another, feeding the illusion of separation. True food nourishes light. False food binds one to dust. The divine table. The preordained matrix of nourishment established in stage 10, where every living being drew life directly from its natural resonance. Trees, fruits, seeds, roots, waters, and light were designed as vibrational foods, harmonizing the elements rather than consuming them. Man, being both the highest and most balanced resonance of RaMaSedi, was meant to feed on living light, which later condensed into fruits, grains, and herbs, the gentle forms of the same light energy. Animals, being extensions of elemental vibrations, each had a corresponding plant or mineral sustenance aligned to their essence. In this order, no being consumed another, for each drew life from the table that matched its vibration. The transition from vibrational to flesh-based consumption marks the energetic fall. When man's awareness descended further into the body and the beast followed the same density, hunger became materialized. The appetite turned outward, mistaking life for substance. In that fall, both man and animal began to feed upon forms rather than forces, devouring dust to sustain dust. This inversion was the true original sin, not moral disobedience, but energetic inversion, taking life from death instead of receiving life from light. Thus, meat consumption, whether among men or beasts, is the sign of forgetfulness, a distortion of the divine table, where the eater consumes its own mirrored flesh. Scientific resonance, photosynthesis and trophic levels. In natural ecology, all life originates from sunlight. Carnivory is a later adaptive complexity after the fall into competitive environments. Human physiology, teeth, digestive enzymes, and intestinal length all suggest humans are optimized for fruit and plant-based diets, aligning with the original design concept. Energy transfer law. Every trophic step, herbivore to carnivore, loses energy, symbolic of the fall from pure light efficiency to denser energy dependence. Biblical resonance, Genesis 1, 29-30, King James Version. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, and to every beast of the earth, every green herb for meat. This is the divine table, food originally plant-based for all creatures. Genesis 9:3, meat consumption is permitted after the flood, symbolizing man's descent and divine concession to fallen vibration. Isaiah 11:6-9, prophetic return to peace. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. Restoration of the divine table at the return to higher vibration. Spiritual resonance, cross-tradition. Hindu and Jain cosmology, non-violence, ahimsa, as the highest law of life, aligned with sattvic, light-based diet. Kemet, the offerings of the gods are fruits and flowers, and the priests of Ra abstain from flesh to maintain purity of vibration. African ancestral context. Many Bantu initiation diets required abstaining from flesh during spiritual rites, indicating awareness that flesh dulls light-frequency communication with Source. In stage 10, RaMaSedi established the divine table, the matrix of provision in which every being receives sustenance according to its vibration. For man, food was light-made edible, fruits, grains, herbs, waters, and energies drawn directly from the living breath of nature. For animals, nourishment flowed from the same order, plants, minerals, and the subtle forces that match their elemental pattern. In that divine arrangement, no being consumed another. Life was shared through resonance, not through death. But when the awareness of man descended deeper into matter, the appetite of dust awakened. Hunger shifted from vibration to form. Animals followed man's fall, and the natural order inverted. Beings began to devour the very substance from which they were formed. Flesh fed upon flesh, dust upon dust. Thus began the age of consumption, the era where sustenance became survival, and eating became an act of forgetting. To consume meat is, therefore, to symbolically consume oneself. For flesh is the shared clay of both man and beast. True food nourishes light. False food binds one to dust. To return to the divine table is to remember one's original diet of harmony, the food of RaMaSedi, the nourishment of life without death. Stage 11 marks the deepening of creation's embodiment, the point where spirit, through man, entered into full relationship with matter. Here, RaMaSedi no longer simply shaped the world from above, but through man, continued creation from within. Together they gave life to the animals, the intermediaries of soul experience, extensions of consciousness designed to reflect, assist, and accompany humanity in its journey through the lower vibrations of being. In this unfolding, the law of nourishment was established, the divine table, ensuring that every life form receives sustenance in harmony with its essence. Each being was provided for according to its vibration. No life needed to destroy another to survive. But as the spirit densified and awareness sank into form, that harmony fractured. Man and beast both forgot their higher source and began to feed upon matter rather than light, exchanging divine resonance for physical appetite. Thus began the long night of consumption, the age where life sustained itself through death. Yet even in this fall, the seed of memory remained. Buried within the soul is the echo of RaMaSedi's original order, a remembrance that still stirs when we show kindness to animals, honor the earth, or choose life over harm. Stage 11, therefore, is not only the story of descent, but also of hidden continuity, the thread that binds spirit to flesh, heaven to earth, memory to creation. It is the stage where man learns what it means to create, to nurture, to destroy, and ultimately to remember that all forms of life, from the greatest beast to the smallest insects, are fragments of the same eternal source, each one a reflection of RaMaSedi's breath in a different frequency of being.